Welcome to Adeptus On-Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week, we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Adeptus On-Air. I am your host, Mike Hoffman, and today I am joined by the very funny Richard Sparks. Richard, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Michael. Thank you.
Well, hopefully you're funny. We'll see. I've heard you're a comedy writer, so we're gonna assess ourselves in the next 30 minutes. But a little bit about Richard. Richard's an English-born comedy writer, lyricist, librettist, author, and director, now living in LA. His writing credentials span the gamut of the entertainment world, from film and TV and books through lyrics for operas. His TV writing includes iconic shows like Not the 9 O'Clock News on the BBC TV and The Secret Policeman's Ball. He's written several books throughout his time, and his latest book, New Rock, New Roll, focuses on a perfect blend of the gaming world and epic fantasy. So excited to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
No problem. So it's a very diverse yet similar path you've taken, because obviously it all involves writing, but in completely different genres and styles and so forth like that. So where did, I guess up front, before we get to the different styles, where did the passion for writing come from?
I just always loved it. Even when I was 6 years old, I was creating cartoon stories with a school friend about the adventures of a gunslinging rabbit called Bunny Goes West. Hugh Christie did the pictures. I supplied about 8 words of bubbles. It remains unpublished, but I just always loved writing as much as reading. Particularly loved what Marina Warner calls wonder tales. We used to call them fairy stories. Anything to do with fantasy, and the first great work in our literature is Beowulf, and that's a fantasy. It's got a dragon in it, and a hoard of treasure, and a monster, and a monstrous mother.
I'm not a big reader, but I did read Beowulf in school, so that's actually...
It's tough to read now. I was lucky enough to study it at university, read Old English, so I could get my head around it all those years ago. But Seamus Heaney's done a very good modern translation to modern English, which I'd recommend thoroughly.
Yeah, it's funny how, do you feel that like English literature is different than a lot? Like obviously I was born and raised in the US, and we did have exposure to other books, other and so forth. But English literature, I think, takes on a whole different level.
Well, yeah, it can be parochial as well. I mean, at university, we particularly admired a lot of 20th century and 19th century American writing. I studied it quite intensely in certain courses that I did. At Oxford, you just do one thing, which is,
Yeah.
English language and literature. And
So is that what you studied? I mean, was your studying, like, were you like a literature major, for lack of a better?
Yeah, there is no minor. You just do and my finals there were 8 papers that were literature and 1 of language, and that was the hardest one. I'm by
Yeah.
no means much of a linguist, but I was.
So when you went to university, like, what were you hoping to be? We go to school. I went to school. I knew I wanted to be something in the accounting world. Was your objective to be a writer?
Always at the back of my mind, but I didn't go to university with the intention of taking a course that was going to set me up in any way in life. It wasn't taking a vocational course in computer programming or plumbing or something useful. It's just, I mean, literature is basically just the study of the world's cultures. And, the teachers are brilliant at Oxford. So you were moving across from Russian to French to German literature in the space of an hour, and desperately trying to keep up with the guy. As he said, well, but at the same time, over in Germany, this was going on.
So what was your passion? What type of literature? Like you just mentioned a whole bunch of different genres, from based on geographics, based upon styles. What was your favorite at university?
Difficult one. I think I actually got steered slightly wrong by my tutor, Jonathan Wordsworth, who's legendary at Oxford. He really liked students who were writers. For example, Philip Pullman was one of his, Martin Amis, Will Gatty, who writes under the name Daniel Finn, Will Self. He loved writing, and he and I just used to talk about writing all the time rather than literature. And he steered me towards the Romantics, the classicists rather than the Romantics, which is the 18th century Pope and Dryden and Swift and those people, which I think chimed with my wit, my love of comedy, because they were very sharp and satirical. But the other side of me particularly loved the poetry of the next century, the Tennysons and Goethes in Germany and Browning and Gerard Manley Hopkins. So it's fairly widely spread. But on your question of did I intend to be a writer, well, when we were all saying after finals, what are you going to do when you grow up? I said, well, I'm going to be a writer. And my friends all said, what, you? What? Bit of a
Well, you
shock.
showed them.
Yeah, well, no, yeah, but there were one or two people who took writing very seriously there and were kind of obviously going to be writers. And I just rather surprised people. But I really never did anything else. I had a job for a couple of years in Welsh television, writing the things this announcers say between programs and making trailers, and really, really grateful to have that job. It was a great,
So was that your
great,
first job after you graduated?
yeah. Well, my first job was teaching a boy private lessons to pass his exams, and then working as a very incompetent taxi driver in London and losing £10 a week in total. I just wanted to sit at the side of the road and write.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was mainly
So,
writing letters to people like Marvel Comics saying, please take me on, but of course never got a reply. The usual.
so comedy writing. Let's start with
Yeah,
that for a second.
yeah.
I mean, that's obviously a totally different. It's a whole different beast because obviously, I guess every type of writing is a different beast. But to me, in comedy writing, you're writing for that instant spark, that instant laugh, or at least how I view it. Whereas if you're writing a novel or something like that, you're building and you're setting scenes and you're twist and turns. So it seems like comedy writing is a little more, what's the word, like a short term impact.
Yeah,
Is
it's a
that a
little.
fair assessment?
It depends what time of comedy. I mean, if you're writing gags and sketches and stuff, it's a bit more result orientated, or
Mhm.
whatever. If you're writing a novel, which I've now been starting to do, the comedy just comes in naturally. I can't help it. There are absurdities in real life, and in the world of fantasy, there are absurdities which I exploit. They are adventures. I've written 4 in the series so far. The first one's just been published, and crazy things happen, and it's to the advantage of the story that it's not just one tonal, very taking itself seriously, sword and sorcery. It's got plenty of um, bizarre things that happened, and I really enjoyed stumbling across them.
Now, when you were doing the comedy writing, obviously, was that for some of the shows I mentioned earlier, like the Not the 9 o'clock News and things like that?
Yeah,
You know,
and I
when you
started
were
off writing.
writing it,
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, when you were writing it, are you thinking in your mind, okay, I'm writing it for this person, so you know how they could deliver something to be funnier? Or are you just kind of writing it, not necessarily knowing who's going to be saying your lines and then kind of adjusting on the fly?
It's both. Uh, I started off writing sketch comedy at university, similar to the Harvard, is it Hasty Pudding or something that they, student comedy, and we
Mhm.
took them up to Edinburgh festivals, which is where I first met Rowan Atkinson, who I wrote a sketch that became basically his party piece for a few years, and launched him to public notice in The Secret Policeman's Ball that John Cleese
Yeah.
produced. And I wrote that specifically for Rowan, but I didn't know how he was going to do it, by which I meant that we were doing a show, 3 people in it, one of whom was my former, uh, my writing partner. And so I was used to writing for him.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Curtis and Rowan were writing together, and they were used to writing for each other. So we sometimes we grabbed sketches we'd done before, cobbled them together. It was not a particularly successful sketch comedy, and I one day thought, look, I can't just keep writing for my friend. I should write something for the new guy. And so I wrote the schoolmaster sketch. Rowan did it, And a year later, he called me up and said, John Cleese just rang. He wants me to do this. Can I do the schoolmaster sketch in his new show? And I said, you bet.
Absolutely.
So we went down to Her Majesty's Theatre and met all my heroes like Billy Connolly and Peter Cook and Pete Townsend and John Cleese, and Rowan did his sketch, my sketch, his performance. And it is a dual effort. Chekhov said, I write
Yeah,
one
no,
thing. Sorry, go
what
ahead.
level of collaboration goes into that? So, is it a back and forth with you and what I'll call the performer?
In
Uh,
that case, almost none. I woke up one morning with a bit of a hangover in 1978 and thought I'd better write something for the new guys, I called him. Started writing sketch, eventually finished it, typed it up, and gave it to Rowan that morning in rehearsals. And he just looked and went, okay. Wandered off, and I thought, well, he didn't say this is terrible and throw it back at me. And then the first time he did it, by then it was him.
uh
It was his interpretation. I didn't know how he was going to do it.
Sure.
And he just ate it alive. He took his time. He played with invisible people in the audience. It was an empty rehearsal room with just the director and me and Rowan on stage. And I just thought, good Lord, wow, this does work, doesn't it? So Chekhov said, I write one thing, the actors write another thing. Together we make a show.
Yeah.
And by write, he doesn't mean change the words, although Rowan did come up with a couple of good gags for it, of course, because it's always, you know. But basically, he worked on it after I'd worked on it. And what you really want people to do is not look through the actor at the writer and think,
Yeah.
who wrote that? They want to see a character on stage and just trip out on that.
I think what's interesting, and I've always been a big fan of, you know, the American sitcom.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and the interesting thing is, I've seen a lot of documentaries on it, and one of the interesting things I've always found is when, and now there's a distinction because a lot of the new shows don't have a live studio audience for recordings.
Indeed.
But what I always found interesting was, how the writers would change a scene based upon the reaction of that live audience. Where even though there's the laughter light, you can tell genuine laughter from kind and directed laughter.
Well,
And
you're always wary of the wrong kind of laughter.
yeah.
You
So
can't.
I remember the scenes where they'd be in between and they'd be huddling. This line didn't deliver. And what I thought was fascinating, a lot of these things is they bring over the actor who's delivering the line and says, basically you were just out there, what would feel right there, and they bounce off ideas and then
Yeah,
they try it again. And oftentimes it was the actor who basically knew his character better than anyone because, he or she is
that's
that character. And he was the one kind of like came up with, all right, yeah, let's just change it a little bit. The delivery,
oh yeah.
the tone, maybe the whole line, and to me that collaboration's fascinating because obviously when you watch the show you don't see it. But when you these behind the scenes thing, you really get a really good look at how that happens.
When it's going well, I mean, you're so grateful to the performers. We all, writers always say, actors have saved our backside so many times. It's
Yeah,
kind of hard to write well, but if you got the character flying and they know what they're doing, then they get wind under their wings. I was lucky
sure.
enough to work on, not on, but near the last year of Who's the Boss with Blake Hunter and Marty Feldman, who created, not Marty Feldman, Marty Cohan, sorry, not Marty Feldman. Uh, they bought a show that I'd written in England and hired me to go to the States, which is why I ended up in California. So I was sort of working in the office around the same time as that last year was going on. And I was desperately keen to sit in the writer's room and learn what I could and listen. And mainly spent my time going out to lunch with Blake and Marty and planning our new show, which never happened in the end. So I
Yeah.
did get to go and sneak into the writers' room a couple of times and listen and see them working and go to recordings and see those moments. But it's kind of
You
painful
made
because I
an
wish.
interesting comment, but I'm going to give you more of a compliment than you gave yourself. You said it's a writer that's really, it's the actor that's really important. But there's been a lot of shows in time that can have the best actors, can have the most famous actors, can have the actors with the best reputation. And if the material they're given is garbage, that actor can't pull it off. So those writers,
Yeah, well,
let's
that
face it,
is.
you don't watch a sitcom too often. I'll only speak for the sitcom genre. You don't watch a sitcom that often and say, wow, that acting's really good. You say, wow, that writing's really funny.
Yeah, of course you're completely right. But it's just quite often you realize it's other writers have said this. The actors saved our backside. So not
Oh
necessarily
yeah,
in a sitcom, in a play or whatever it is. And
yeah,
actors are, we're really grateful to them when they pull it off. And credit where credit's due. Yes. Look, I write a lot of lyrics and I write opera libretti mainly with Lee Holdridge, who's a multi-Emmy winning, extremely talented composer. And people always say, what comes first, the music or the words? Well, the words, of course, because otherwise the musician doesn't know what he's writing about.
sure, yeah. So all right, so let's move on from that
Okay.
because you don't see too often, and maybe you do, and we just don't know about it, where a lyricist, has a background in comedy writing because, well, I'm sure you could describe some similarities. They're obviously very different, and then you can think traditional lyricist, but then let's take it one step further with you, and let's say, okay, you're writing lyric, you're writing for operas, which is a whole nother beast. So how does that evolve from comedy writing to this?
Uh, in all sorts of different ways. It's all a matter of using your wit. Have your wits about you, and wit is a word that with many different meanings. One of which is to be funny, and the other of which is to be alert and alive. And I've done, for example, Il Seraglio, Mozart's, also called Die Entführung aus dem Serail, one of his earliest ones. My job was to rewrite the speeches between the arias. It's an odd opera in that it's not through sung. It's a bit like an operetta, and they speak and then they sing and then they speak and then they sing, or a bit like a musical. And so my job was to make the rather laboured 18th century jokes accessible to a 20th century audience and change them and bring it to life.
So back to your other comment, you said, well, obviously, what comes first, the music or the words or the actual music? And obviously, I understand what you're saying. The words come first, and you kind of know what you're writing about.
I've done the
And maybe
opposite. I've done the opposite with Hansel and
well,
Gretel at
that's
the
where
LA.
I was going with this
Yeah,
exactly because I gotta believe, over the past year, I've talked to a lot of songwriters, but also some on the music side, not necessarily on the lyric
yeah.
side.
I have been
And
sent songs and say put words to this. I did a new libretto for Hansel and Gretel, a beautiful opera by Engelbert Humperdinck at the LA Opera, which was just recently revived at Dallas Opera. Lovely to see that production again. Doug Fitch, a great designer director.
Mhm.
And that was a chance to be, well, A, to correct the mistakes that were in the original libretto, and
Yeah,
B, to bring it to life in a way
right.
that is fresh and not just a museum piece translation.
Yeah, because because you hear this, you hear the stories a lot where someone says, I woke up, had this song in my head,
Yeah, well,
not the words, a chord, the chorus and so forth. And they quickly had to, get out of bed, go to their piano and kind of, play it out and so forth. And obviously
scra-
with that, they don't have the words. So in that case, they're working in a completely different order because they have this tune that they can't get out of their head and they just got to find words for it.
I I rest your case. Scrambled eggs, the most famous one of the lot.
Yeah.
Where the words were wrong, so he changed it to yesterday.
That was a pretty popular song, I believe.
That was pretty good. Scrambled eggs was not the best lyric in the end, but that's what he
Yeah.
woke up in his head
Oh,
with Paul
wow.
McCartney.
I,
Uh,
I never heard that before. That's funny.
well, I could be
Interesting.
lying, but I
No,
think
well,
I think it's
I'm not going to
possible.
check you, so you can tell me you're telling the truth. I'm gonna
I heard
I'm
it.
gonna believe you. So I guess did you always have a passion for opera? Like before you
No,
obviously
no,
to get into that genre?
I don't. I always thought it was for posh, rich old people.
Yeah.
I didn't come from a musical family. I was a fairly provincial kid, brought up in a town 100 miles west of London. My parents were both school teachers. After the war, there wasn't a great deal of money around, so never went near an opera.
Hmm.
But when I left university, as I said, I was working in Welsh TV, and
Yeah.
through friends, somebody's girlfriend knew somebody that we ended up with six of us living in a house 10 miles outside Cardiff. And so we hitched to work with each other, carpool. And one of them was a young director at the Welsh Opera. He's an assistant director. And so I had to sometimes go and wait backstage for him to give me a lift back to the house. And I'd be sitting in a box in an empty theatre, and then suddenly 40 Welsh people shamble on stage in their day clothes and, oh, bloody hell, what's it about, complaining about this, that, and the other. And then
Yeah, yeah,
baton up, and they burst into this incredible chorus, and you go, bloody hell. Yeah,
yeah.
what is this? And I realized that it was a very, very exciting and interesting art form. I always believe in trying to keep an open mind if you can. Don't just stick to one kind of music. Don't just stick to
Hmm.
one kind of book, because there are other horizons to explore beyond. And
Yeah, I
now
mean,
I adore opera. Well, some of it, some of them.
well, I think yeah, I think part of the reason you adore it right now is because obviously you can appreciate it. I know I went to one as a kid, and my first perception of it was so not positive that I've never really had the interest to go back to it because as a kid,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
remember what it was, but you're hearing someone sing in a
in a
tone
foreign
that you're not
language.
used to, words you don't understand because I don't know what
Yeah.
I saw, but I know it wasn't English. And you're sitting there just waiting for it to end. So obviously, when that's your first impression of something,
Oh,
it's very hard.
absolutely. At the Hansel and Gretel that was done in the LA Opera a few times. One time, my wife and I were sitting in the audience, and the witch's house came towards the gingerbread house that Doug had designed, came in with the music, and dum dum
Yeah,
dum 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 dum, and the little boy in front of us grabbed his mother and said, "Oh no!"
yeah,
Totally into it. It was perfect for that age group. But if he'd been watching, I don't know, Lohengrin, which I love now, but I'm old. And it's Wagner is waiting for you at the end of your life if you want to go there.
yeah.
But I didn't get him when I was in my 20s.
Right, right, right. So so you've been kind of all over the place, and now we're obviously going to get to your book writing, in a second. But before we get to that, what is your process in your head as you're moving from one to the next? And obviously, I don't think they're distinct moves like you're going to say, I'm stopped doing comedy writing, I'm now doing this. But obviously, this has been a career for you. So obviously, you do this because you have a passion for it and you enjoy it. But at the
Love
same
it.
point in time, you need to make a living.
Yeah,
So how do you
there's,
balance both things, your passion and your love versus, okay, I got to bring home a paycheck?
I'll try and make this as short as I can. I used to have this idea that you're not a writer unless you're being paid, and not a professional writer. And a friend of mine who was a composer who never really had a career because he thought like that. He would only write when he was paid, and he went into
Mm-hmm.
academia, a very good teacher. I realized that the times when there are no jobs, when there are no paid writing gigs, that's the time when you can write good stuff. You can write for
Mm-hmm.
yourself. That's when you're going to find out your stuff. Because if you're script writing, usually you're a gun for hire, even if you created the show.
Yeah,
And script writing is, of course, it's a director's medium. Stage is an actor's medium. Opera is a singer's medium and a composer's medium. But writing narrative books is a writer's medium. It's just me and the reader. So
yeah.
I was always trying to get there. It took me a long time, but when the idea fell out of the sky and hit me on the head, I just thought, oh, at last. I couldn't just believe my luck. And
So
sorry,
looking back at it, no real regrets on how you got to this point.
I wish I'd got there earlier, but in a way, I couldn't have done because the landscape didn't exist. There were no multiplayer online role playing games. Out, my love for them sprang into this book. It's not about games. It's not about a game world or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's a real adventure in a world like the wonderful worlds that video designers create for us now. Yeah, but I couldn't have written this 20 years ago because there simply was no springboard for me to take off from.
So what was the impetus for you to sit down and write New Rock, New Roll? Like,
Well, ROLE role playing game, get it? Well, it's
yeah,
simple. I was just I used to wander around the world with my friends in my earphones, getting up to mischief in various games, and sometimes laughing our heads off, and otherwise I'd just be playing by myself in a single
sure.
game. And I just one day I thought, I think I was chatting with somebody, what would it really like to be that guy? My avatar was a heroic young battle mage healer who could deal damages and heal his friends. And what would it really be like to be that guy in a world like that? And there was only one way to find out, which was to write it. So the premise basically is he and his two teammates win the world championship of sword and sorcery live online. And the next thing he knows, he's standing in a field in the middle of nowhere with just a crappy sword and a useless shield and no idea where he is, no sign of the others, no idea what's happened. And if he's going to find answers to any of those questions, he has to survive. And wolves are chasing him. And then it gets worse.
So you write a book, you kind of know what you're writing about.
Yeah,
At what point in the writing process do you know how it's ending?
almost immediately. You
Okay, so
have to.
you had a
Um,
beginning and an end.
no, I had a beginning. I had a what if, and I got the what if bang. And then I got to explain this. Where does this land? It's not the ending so much. The ending is the ending of the plot. Where does the book land? What does it all add up to? How does it explain itself? So in the third and fourth books, the landings are different. They're much, well, it doesn't matter. So the first thing you should always do, and I stress this to writers all the time, is all young writers, work out your ending first. You don't have to know anything else between beginning and ending. Just where does it end up? Where does it land? I mean, imagine writing a whodunit detective story and you don't know who the killer was. It's
Right.
ridiculous. You'd be in the same spot as the audience. You have to
Sure.
be ahead of them. Then, once you've decided on your ending, of course, it has to end like that. Then you're free for the next 400 pages. You work backwards. You set your traps and your red herrings and your confusions, and you send your heroes off in the wrong direction with their heads up their backsides, not knowing what's going on,
Hmm.
and you make things difficult for them. And then at the end, you get to the end, and they go, "Oh, it's over there. You got
Yeah.
me. You got me." And that's what audiences love. They love to be surprised.
Oh, agreed, agreed. So I'm going back to my middle school and high school days, and as I said to you before, not a big reader, so the English classes that you love were definitely not my favorites. And I'm going to tell you my thought process and tell me if I'm wrong. And I think you might tell me I'm wrong. So when we're studying a book, and I can't even give you a specific example, then you're having days and days of discussions about the themes and the imagery, and this was the theme of the book, and this was the lesson to be taught. Is a lot of that stuff after the fact, okay, this is the theme of the book, or is this the writer's intent to have this theme or lesson?
Not generalizing, but yes. This is just academics trying to pretend they know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
It's just irrelevant. The most important thing is to tell a story. If a, I've read a lot of high literature. I'm less now these days. I'll read anything, but if you can't make me turn the page,
right,
I just lose interest. I don't have the time. I'd rather write my own book than read something
right.
that's boring, even if it's brilliant.
Well,
So all this
to
stuff about
me,
themes and metaphors and dangling participles and stuff, that's all forensic.
yeah,
It's
because I think now also with people, especially for the younger generation, attention spans now are so low because there's always something else. I mean, this is always in their hand, and they can go on TikTok and they could watch a 10-second story and move on to the next 10-second story, next
yeah,
10-second story. So I think nowadays, watching a
but
movie or reading a book, if they're not sucked into it in the first 5-10 minutes,
that's
they're
what I
going to
was
look
going to
for
say.
a different alternative.
That's what I
So
was
the
going to.
days where, oh, this book really kicks in chapter 4,
Yeah, that.
people aren't making it to chapter 4 anymore because they'll find another book, they'll download another book, or if they want to read, they'll, I don't have to take a trip to the library where I got to wait for mom to drive me. I can just hit a button and try a new one.
Listen, you made two very good points there. I'd like to try and answer them in order. Um, there is some people have talked about the rise of the word processor novel, in that because of computers, writers can
Mm-hmm.
make them don't not throw stuff away and arrange them and make them fatter than they need to be. I question that because a lot of young people, my daughter's age, ever since she was 15, just read flat out all the time. My neighbour here, I'm in London at the moment. He's 12, and he read New Rock, New Roll. I'm thankful to say, he absolutely loved it. And for Christmas, I've given him the sequel, telling him, look, the editor and I still need to finish it, but
Yeah.
so he's right. And my other test reader's 82, and the same reaction. So people will read, but you're absolutely right. You got to hook them. And I've made a life's study of this with producers I've talked to and agents and directors and some actors. How many pages do you give a screenplay or a script
Right.
before you throw it away?
Hmm.
It's most generous would be 20. It's usually 6 to 12.
Yeah.
They know it's not for them and they throw it away. Well, that told me something as a writer. You got to hook them.
Yeah. And then you got to keep them because you hook them and then you go boring to set a scene for the next 40 pages and that scene has no action or excitement. The
Yep,
hook's going to be faded away by then. That hook was,
yep, yep.
that it was either yesterday's reading or that was, an hour ago.
It's absolutely right. I mean, that is your job as a writer. It's not my job to make the reader bend over backwards to understand what I'm writing. And this is an argument I have with poets when I talk to them and readers of poetry. Is I get a bit silly about it and I say, look, a lot of free verse is just word salad. Why do I
Mm-hmm.
have to do all the work as a reader when this guy's just throwing words at a page and expecting me to do the work for him? Of course, it's a
Yeah.
silly argument because it's a generalization, but it is something to do with the point that it's the writer's job to do the work, and the reader's gets the little 10% of the iceberg that sticks up above the water. That's what you get. I have to do the 90% with my editor and
Yeah.
the rest of us.
So
Uh,
what's next for you?
well, I've finished 4 books in the series. The second one will be published next autumn, fall in America. I'm now currently struggling in the early stages of book 5. It's funny, you just think it would get easier, but it doesn't. I mean, presumably you
Well,
know.
I assume you want to make it the same because they enjoyed the first four, but you got to make it different.
Oh, you got me. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The same, but different. I mean, the rule in
Yeah.
TV is if it works, do it again. But if you do the same, for example, my people are blundering around having adventures and doing basically quests. And if you've already had a quest with one kind of result or opposition or boss at the end of it or monster or problem,
Hmm.
you can't repeat that. But you can repeat the idea of them going on a quest and having another problem to solve.
Yeah.
So some of the problem in book 3, the problem is immensely complicated, and I just had so much fun tying myself in knots. And now looking back, I go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I'm looking forward in book 5 at the moment, going, help.
It's a very, I gotta believe it's a tightrope because if it's the same, they're bored,
Yeah,
and if it's different, well, this is a totally different book. It's not part of the quote unquote franchise.
I didn't want this. I wanted the other book. But
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
this is the thing with music. You take my father-in-law is a very eminent music producer, and whenever he took a song into the executives, they always say, "Oh, it's not whatever the last one the artist did was. It's not that. Of course, it isn't that."
Yeah. It's it's
So
it's 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 it. Yeah, I admire you. I admire someone. I've said this so many times that can sit and write a 300 or 400 page book because the time and the edits and the back and forth and being able to provide enough detail so I can understand and I can visualize, and that's just such a skill. I've always found I'm more appreciative of things people do that I know I don't have the ability to do,
yeah,
and that is definitely one of those things. So I admire that skill, and to be able to be on book 5 of a series is just you know
well, it's
huge amount of respect to you for doing that.
where is it over there? There's my 5-string banjo there. I've been
Uh-huh.
playing for 30 years and I'm still useless. Well, mediocre. And I go and have lessons once a week in Los Angeles, and I'm with Bill, who's brilliant
Uh-huh.
professional. And I said, God, I just got to practice more. I've got to just do 20 minutes a day. And he says,
Yeah.
I do 20 minutes an hour. What are you talking about?
Well, that's what they
This
might.
is
Well,
his job, is to be good.
yeah.
I don't have to
Listen,
be good at the banjo. I can just pick it up
right.
and
You're
have,
doing it because you enjoy it, not
and,
because you need
right.
to. It's not
Yeah,
your career. It's your hobby, and I
right.
think that's a fine line also.
But with the work, that's where you have to be good. And it's also fascinating. There's
Yeah.
nothing I'd rather do. And I quite enjoy the banging my head against the brick wall part of it, of not knowing what's going on, of going, Okay. And backing up and pushing and throwing stuff
Yeah,
away. Philip Pullman said, look, you promised you'd write 500 words a day, just sit down and write them, which
right.
is basic advice to a writer, not hugely helpful. But you can always throw those 500 pages away the
Yeah,
next day. If they're no good, just write them, throw them away. In the third book, as I said, it's very complicated, and I must have thrown 200 pages away to
mhm.
end up with a 500-page book.
500 pages. That's amazing. To write 500 pages. That's just so impressive to me.
Oh, well,
Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. It was, very interesting. Like I said, I'm not a reader, but I think
well,
I'm going to check it out.
do you listen to audiobooks?
Uh, I have. I'm not. I did when I was in my car. Like I tried it once or twice
There
for
you
like when I had a
go.
lot of
On
driving to
long
do.
journeys, My
Yeah,
wife and I,
long
we
journeys.
drive from
Yes,
LA to Las Vegas. We listen to
yes.
audiobooks.
Then I would
Well,
listen to an audiobook.
go on my website, download the free audio chapter for sample, me reading it, see if you like it, and if you do, buy the audiobook and listen on your
There you
next
go.
trip to Las Vegas. Or you can
You
get
have my word.
a free chapter of printed for your Kindle
I
or
will
for your
definitely try it out
computer.
for sure.
So
But
it's
listen, thank you again for your time. And
that's richardsparks.com.
oh yeah, no, thank you. So any other platforms as well?
Oh,
RichardSparks.com.
I have an assistant. We got Instagram, I think, is richardsparks_author.
Okay.
There are probably a couple of others, but forgive me.
I will
If
like
you
go
go
to those two and start there.
if you go to the website richardsparks.com, there are links there, and we're unfortunately we got pillaged by scoundrels, so the website we had to rebuild it. Uh,
It's always something nowadays. But again, a pleasure talking to you, and I wish you nothing but continued success.
well, thank you so much for having me, Michael. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, be well.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you have a question related to this episode or have a request for what you would like to hear, please email us at marketing@adeptuscpas.com. You can also find us at adeptuscpas.com online or follow us at Adeptus on social media. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.